Hi there, everyone. Today the Bookworms are going to be reading Charlie and the Great Glass Elevator, written by Roald Dahl. Chapter 7. Something Nasty in the Lips. Grandma Josephine had stopped screaming now. She had gone rigid with shock. The rest of the group by the bed, including Charlie and Grandpa Joe, had become as still as stone. They dared not move. They dared hardly breathe. And Mr. Wonka, who had swung quickly around to look when the first scream came, was as dumbstruck as the rest. He stood motionless, gaping at the thing in the lift, his mouth slightly open, his eyes stretched wide as two wheels. What he saw, what they all saw, was this. It looked more than anything like an enormous egg balanced on its pointed end. It was as tall as a big boy and wider than the fattest man. The greenish-brown skin had a shiny, wettish appearance, and there were wrinkles in it. About 3/4 of the way up, in the widest part, there were two large round eyes as big as teacups. The eyes were white, but each had a brilliant red pupil in the center. The red pupils were resting on Mr. Wonka. But now they began traveling slowly across to Charlie and Grandpa Joe and the others by the bed, settling upon them and gazing at them with a cold, malevolent stare. The eyes were everything. There were no other features, no nose or mouth or ears, but the entire egg-shaped body was itself moving very, very slightly, pulsing and bulging gently here and there as though the skin were filled with some thick fluid. At this point, Charlie suddenly noticed that the next lift was coming down. The indicator numbers above the door were flashing. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. L for lobby. There was a slight pause. The door slid open, and there, inside the second lift, was another enormous, slimy, wrinkled, greenish-brown egg with eyes. Now the numbers were flashing above all three of the remaining lifts. Down they came, down, 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 and soon, at precisely the same time, they reached the lobby floor and the door slid open. 5 open doors now, 1 creature in each, 5 in all, and 5 pairs of eyes with brilliant red centers, all watching Mr. Wonka and watching Charlie and Grandpa Joe and the others. There were slight differences in size and shape between the 5, but all had the same greenish-brown wrinkled skin, and the skin was rippling and pulsing. For about 30 seconds, nothing happened. Nobody stirred. Nobody made a sound. The silence was terrible. So was the suspense. Charlie was so frightened he felt himself shrinking inside his skin. Then he saw the creature in the left-hand lift suddenly starting to change shape. Its body was slowly becoming longer and longer, and thinner, going up and up towards the roof of the lift, not straight up, but curving a little to the left, making a snake-like curve that was curiously graceful, up to the left and then curling over the top to the right and coming down again in a half circle. And then the bottom end began to grow out as well, like a tail, creeping along the floor to the left, until at last the creature which had originally looked like a huge egg now looked like a long curvy serpent standing up on its tail. Then the one in the next lift began stretching itself in much the same way. And what a weird and oozy thing it was to watch! It was twisting itself into a shape that was a bit different from the first, balancing itself almost, but not quite on the tip of its tail. Then the 3 remaining creatures began stretching themselves all at the same time, each one elongating itself slowly upward, growing taller and taller, thinner and thinner, curving and twisting, stretching and stretching, curling and bending, balancing either on the tail or the head or both, and turned sideways so that only one eye was visible. When they had all stopped stretching and bending, this was how they finished up. "Scram!" shouted Mr. Wonka. "Get out quick!" People have never moved faster than Grandpa Joe and Charlie and Mr. and Mrs. Bucket at that moment. They all got behind the bed and started pushing like crazy. Mr. Wonka ran in front of them shouting, "Scram! Scram! Scram!" And in 10 seconds flat, all of them were out of the lobby and back inside the great glass elevator, Frantically, Mr. Wonka began undoing bolts and pressing buttons. The door of the great glass elevator snapped shut, and the whole thing leaped sideways. They were away! And of course, all of them, including the 3 old ones in the bed, floated up again into the air. Chapter 8. The Vermiciousnids. "Oh, my goodness me!" gasped Mr. Wonka. "Oh, my sainted pants! Oh, my painted ants! Oh, my crawling cats! I hope never to see anything like that again!" He floated over to the white button and pressed it. The booster rockets fired. The elevator shot forward at such a speed that soon the space hotel was out of sight far behind. "But who were those awful creatures?" Charlie asked. "You mean you didn't know?" cried Mr. Wonka. "Well, it's a good thing you didn't. If you'd had even the faintest idea of what horrors you were up against, the marrow would have run out of your bones. You'd have been fossilized with fear and glued to the ground. Then they'd have got you. You'd have been a cooked cucumber. You'd have been rasped into 1,000 tiny bits, grated like cheese and flocculated alive. They'd have been necklaces from your knuckle bones and bracelets from your teeth. Because those creatures, my dear ignorant boy, are the most brutal, vindictive, venomous, murderous beasts in the entire universe." Here, Mr. Wonka paused and ran the tip of a pink tongue all the way around his lips. "Vermiciousnids!" he cried. "That's what they were." He sounded the K. Knids, like that. "I thought they were grobes," Charlie said. "Those oozy-woozy grobes you were telling the president about." "Oh, no. I just made those up to scare the White House," Mr. Wonka answered. "But there is nothing made up about Vermiciousnids, believe you me. They live, as everybody knows, on the planet Verms, which is 18,427 million miles away, and they are very, very clever brutes indeed. The Vermiciousnids can turn itself into any shape it wants. It has no bones. Its body is really one huge muscle, enormously strong but very stretchy and squishy, like a mixture of rubber and putty with steel wires inside. Normally, it is egg-shaped, but it can just as easily give itself 2 legs like a human or 4 legs like a horse. It can become as round as a ball or as long as a kite string. From 50 yards away, a fully grown Vermiciousnid could stretch out its neck and bite your head off without even getting up." "Bite off your head with what?" said Grandma Georgina. "I didn't see any mouth." "They have other things to bite with," said Mr. Wonka darkly. "Such as what?" said Grandma Georgina. "Ring off," said Mr. Wonka. "Your time's up. But listen, everybody. I've just had a funny thought. There I was fooling around with the president and pretending we were creatures from some other planet, and by golly, there actually were creatures from some other planet on board." "Do you think there were many?" Charlie asked. "More than the 5 we saw?" "Thousands," said Mr. Wonka. "There are 500 rooms in that space hotel, and there's probably a family of them in every room. Somebody's going to get a nasty shock when they go on board," said Grandpa Joe. "They'll be eaten like peanuts," said Mr. Wonka. "Every one of them." "You don't really mean that, do you, Mr. Wonka?" Charlie said. "Of course I mean it," said Mr. Wonka. "These Vermiciousnids are the terror of the universe. They travel through the space in great swarms, landing on other stars and planets and destroying everything they find. There used to be some rather nice creatures living on the moon a long time ago. They were called Poozas, but the Vermiciousnids ate the lot. They did the same on Venus and Mars and many other planets." "Why haven't they come down to our Earth and eaten us?" Charlie asked. "They've tried to, Charlie, many times, but they've never made it. You see, all around our Earth there is a vast envelope of air and gas, and anything hitting that at high speeds gets red hot. Space capsules are made of special heat-proof metal, and when they make a re-entry, their speeds are reduced right down to about 2,000 miles an hour, first by retro rockets, and then by something called friction. But even so, they get badly scorched. Nids, which are not heat-proof at all, and don't have any retro rockets, get sizzled up completely before they're halfway through. Have you ever seen a shooting star?" "Lots of them," Charlie said. "Actually, they're not shooting stars at all," said Mr. Wonka. "They're shooting nids. They're nids trying to enter the Earth's atmosphere at high speed and going up in flames. rubbish, said Grandma Georgina. You wait, said Mr. Wonka. You may see it happening before the day is done. But if they're so fierce and dangerous, Charlie said, why didn't they eat us up right away in the Space Hotel? Why did they waste time twisting their bodies into letters and writing scram? Because they're show-offs, Mr. Wonka replied. They're tremendously proud of being able to write like that. But why say scram when they wanted to catch us and eat us? It's the only word they know, Mr. Wonka said. Look! Screamed Grandma Josephine, pointing through the glass. Over there! Before he even looked, Charlie knew exactly what he was going to see. So did the others. They could tell by the high hysterical note in the old lady's voice. And there it was, cruising effortlessly alongside them. A simply colossal Vermiciousnid, as thick as a whale, as long as a lorry, with the most brutal vermicious look in its eye. It was no more than a dozen yards away, egg-shaped, slimy, greenish-brown, with one malevolent red eye, the only one visible, fixed intently upon the people floating inside the great glass elevator. The end has come! Screamed Grandma Georgina. He'll eat us all! Cried Mrs. Bucket. In one gulp! Said Mr. Bucket. We're done for, Charlie, said Grandpa Joe. Charlie nodded. He couldn't speak or make a sound. His throat was seized up with a fright. But this time Mr. Wonka didn't panic. He remained perfectly calm. We'll soon get rid of that, he said, and he pressed 6 buttons all at once, and 6 booster rockets went off simultaneously under the elevator. The elevator leaped forward like a stung horse, faster and faster, but the great green greasy Nid kept pace alongside it with no trouble at all. Make it go away! Yelled Grandma Georgina. I can't stand it looking at me! Dear lady, said Mr. Wonka, it can't possibly get in here. I don't mind admitting I was a trifle alarmed back there in the Space Hotel, and with good reason, but here we have nothing to fear. The great glass elevator is shockproof, waterproof, bomb-proof, bulletproof, and Nid-proof, so just relax and enjoy it. Oh, you Nid, you are vile and vermicious, cried Mr. Wonka. You are slimy and soggy and squishes. But what do we care? 'Cause you can't get in here. So hop it and don't get ambitious. At this point, the massive Nid outside turned and started cruising away from the elevator. There you are, cried Mr. Wonka, triumphant. It heard me. It's going home. But Mr. Wonka was wrong. When the creature was about 100 yards off, it stopped, hovered for a moment, then went smoothly into reverse, coming back toward the elevator with its rear end, which was the pointed end of the egg, now in front. Even going backwards, its acceleration was unbelievable. It was like some monstrous bullet coming at them, and it came so fast nobody had time even to cry out. Crash! It struck the glass elevator with the most enormous bang, and the whole thing shivered and shook. But the glass held, and the Nid bounced off like a rubber ball. What did I tell you? Shouted Mr. Wonka, triumphant. We're safe as sausages in here. We'll have a nasty headache after that, said Grandpa Joe. It's not his head, it's his bottom, said Charlie. Look, there's a big bump coming up on the pointed end where he hit. It's going black and blue. And so it was. A purple, bruisey bump, the size of a small car, was appearing on the pointed rear end of the giant Nid. Hello, you dirty great beast, cried Mr. Wonka. Hello, you great Nid. Tell us, how do you do? You're a rather strange color today. Your bottom is purple and lavender blue. Should it really be looking that way? Are you not feeling well? Are you going to faint? Is it something we cannot discuss? It must be a very unpleasant complaint, for your backside's as big as a bus. Let me get you a doctor. I know just the man. For a Nid with a nasty disease, he's a butcher by trade, which is not a bad plan, and he charges quite reasonable fees. Ah, here he is now. Doc, you really are kind, to travel so far into space. There's your patient, the Nid with the purple behind. Do you think it's a desperate case? Great heavens above! It's no wonder he's pale, said the doc with a horrible grin. There's a sort of balloon on the end of his tail. I must prick it out once with a pin. So he got out a thing like an Indian spear, with feathers all over the top, and he lunged and he caught the Nid smack in the rear. But alas, the balloon didn't pop. Cried the Nid. What on earth am I going to do with this painful, preposterous lump? I can't remain standing the whole summer through, and I cannot sit down on my rump. It's a bad case of rear ache, the medico said, and it's something I cannot repair. If you want to sit down, you must sit on your head, with your bottom high up in the air. Chapter 9. Gobbled Up. On the day when all this was happening, no factories opened anywhere in the world. All offices and schools were closed. Nobody moved away from the television screens, not even for a couple of minutes to get a Coke or to feed the baby. The tension was unbearable. Everybody heard the American president's invitation to the men from Mars to visit him in the White House, and they heard the weird rhyming reply, which sounded rather threatening. They also heard a piercing scream, Grandma Josephine, and a little later on, they heard someone shouting, "Scram! Scram! Scram!" Mr. Wonka. Nobody could make head or tail of the shouting. They took it to be some kind of Martian language. But when the 8 mysterious astronauts suddenly rushed back into their glass capsule and broke away from the space hotel, you could almost hear the great sigh of relief that rose up from the peoples of the Earth. Telegrams and messages poured into the White House, congratulating the president upon his brilliant handling of a frightening situation. The president himself remained calm and thoughtful. He sat at his desk rolling a small piece of wet chewing gum between his finger and thumb. He was waiting for the moment when he could flick it at Miss Tibbs without her seeing him. He flicked it and missed Miss Tibbs, but hit the Chief of the Air Force on the tip of his nose. "Do you think the men from Mars have accepted my invitation to the White House?" the president asked. "Of course they have," said the Foreign Secretary. "It was a brilliant speech, sir." "They're probably on their way down here right now," said Miss Tibbs. "Go and wash that nasty sticky chewing gum off your fingers quickly. They could be here any minute." "Let's have a song first," said the president. "Sing another one about me, Nanny, please." The nurse's song. "This mighty man of whom I sing, the greatest of them all, was once a teeny little thing, just 18 inches tall. I knew him as a tiny tot. I nursed him on my knee. I used to sit him on the pot and wait for him to wee. I always washed between his toes and cut his little nails. I brushed his hair and wiped his nose and weighed him on the scales. Through happy childhood days he strayed, as all nice children should. I smacked him when he disobeyed and stopped when he was good. It soon began to dawn on me he wasn't very bright, because when he was 23 he couldn't read or write. What shall we do?" his parents sobbed. "The boy has got the vapors. He couldn't even get a job delivering the papers." "Aha!" I said, "this little clot could be a politician." "Nanny!" he cried. "Oh, Nanny, what a super proposition!" "Okay," I said, "let's learn and note the art of politics. Let's teach you how to miss the boat, and how to drop some bricks, and how to win the people's vote, and lots of other tricks. Let's learn to make a speech a day upon the TV screen in which you never say exactly what you mean. And most important, by the way, it's not to let your teeth decay and keep your fingers clean. And now that I am 89, it's too late to repent. The fault was mine, the little swine became the president." "Bravo, Nanny!" cried the president, clapping his hands. "Hooray!" shouted the others. "Well done, Miss Vice President, ma'am. Brilliant! Tremendous!" "My goodness," said the president. "Those men from Mars will be here any moment. What on earth are we going to give them for lunch? Where's my chief cook?" The chief cook was a Frenchman. He was also a French spy, and at this moment he was listening at the keyhole of the president's study. "Ici, Monsieur le Président," he said, bursting in. "Chief cook," said the president, "what do men from Mars eat for lunch?" Mars bars, said the chief cook. Baked or boiled? Asked the president. Oh, baked, of course, Monsieur le Président. You will ruin a Mars bar by boiling. The voice of astronaut Shuckworth cut in over the loudspeaker in the president's study. Request permission to link up and go aboard Space Hotel, he said. Permission granted, said the president. Go right ahead, Shuckworth. It's all clear now, thanks to me. And so the large transport capsule, piloted by Shuckworth, Shanks, and Showler, with all the hotel managers and assistant managers and hall porters and pastry chefs and bellboys and waitresses and chambermaids on board, moved in smoothly and linked up with the giant space hotel. Hey there! We've lost our television picture, called the president. I'm afraid the camera got smashed against the side of the space hotel, Mr. President, Shuckworth replied. The president said a very rude word into the microphone, and 10 million children across the nation began repeating it gleefully and got smacked by their parents. All astronauts and 150 hotel staff safely aboard Space Hotel, Shuckworth reported over the radio. We are now standing in the lobby. And what do you think of it all? Asked the president. He knew the whole world was listening in, and he wanted Shuckworth to say how wonderful it was. Shuckworth didn't let him down. Gee, Mr. President, it's just great, he said. It's unbelievable. It's so enormous. And so... It's kind of hard to find words to describe it. It's so truly grand, especially the chandeliers and the carpets and all. I have the chief hotel manager, Mr. Walter W. Wall, beside me now. He would like the honor of a word with you, sir. Put him on, said the president. Mr. President, sir, this is Walter Wall. What a sumptuous hotel this is! The decorations are superb. Have you noticed that all the carpets are wall-to-wall, Mr. Walter Wall? Said the president. I have indeed, Mr. President. All the wallpaper is all wall-to-wall too, Mr. Walter Wall. Yes, sir, Mr. President. Isn't that something? It's going to be a real pleasure running a beautiful hotel like this. Hey, what's going on over there? Something's coming out of the lifts. Help! Suddenly, the loudspeaker in the president's study gave out a series of the most ghastly screams and yells. Aye! Ow! Aye! Help! 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 What on earth's going on? Said the president. Shuckworth! Are you there? Shuckworth? Shanks? Showler? Mr. Walter Wall? Where are you all? What's happening? The screams continued. They were so loud the president had to put his fingers in his ears. Every house in the world that had a television or radio receiver heard those awful screams. There were other noises too, loud grunts and snortings and crunching sounds. Then there was silence. Frantically, the president called the Space Hotel on the radio. Houston called the Space Hotel. The president called Houston. Houston called the president. Then both of them called the Space Hotel again. But answer came there none. Up there in space, all was silent. Something's nasty happened, said the president. It's those men from Mars, said the ex-chief of the army. I told you to let me blow them up. Silence! Snapped the president. I've got to think. The loudspeaker began to crackle. Hello? It said. Hello, hello, hello. Are you receiving me? Space Control in Houston? The president grabbed the mic on his desk. Leave this to me, Houston, he shouted. President Gillygrass here, receiving you loud and clear. Go ahead. Astronaut Shuckworth here, Mr. President. Back aboard the transport capsule. Thank heavens. What happened, Shuckworth? Who's with you? We're most of us here, Mr. President, I'm glad to say. Shanks and Showler are with me, and a whole bunch of other folks. I guess we lost maybe a couple of dozen people altogether. Pastry chefs, hall porters, that sort of thing. It sure was a scramble getting out of that place alive. What do you mean, you lost 24 people? Shouted the president. How did you lose them? Gobbled up, replied Shuckworth. One gulp and that was it. I saw a big 6-foot-tall assistant manager being swallowed up just like you'd swallow a lump of ice cream, Mr. President. No chewing, nothing. Just down the hatch. But who? Yelled the president. Who are you talking about? Who did the swallowing? Hold it! Cried Chuckworth. Oh, my lord, here they all come now! They're coming after us! They're swarming out of the Space Hotel! They're coming out in swarms! You'll have to excuse me a moment, Mr. President. No time to talk right now. That's it for today, everyone. I really hope you enjoyed. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe for more read-alongs. See you next time. Bye!